Let us now end our day with a panel discussion on the economics of Cyprus's peace building, grassroots peace building, entrepreneurship, research and creativity. Argyro Nicolaou, writer, filmmaker and lecturer at Seeger Center for Hellenic Studies, Princeton University, will be moderating the session online.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the final panel of the 2021 Cyprus Forum, Grassroots Peacebuilding, Entrepreneurship, Research, Creativity. My name is Argyro Nicolaou. I am a Cypriot writer and filmmaker based in New York City. And this evening, I have the pleasure of hosting what I am sure will be an extremely informative and necessary discussion on the current state of peace building in Cyprus. I know it's been a long day, but rest assured this panel will be worth your while as I have 6 exceptional panelists with me today. So the past 4 years have seen the formal peace negotiations on the Cyprus problem reach a stalemate. In this dispiriting context, it is more evident than ever that peace building cannot just depend on the future promises of a top-down solution and of a top-down peace negotiation process. Peace building is right here, right now, in the everyday actions of Cypriots building ideas, businesses, and creative projects together. Today, I have the privilege of hosting 6 distinguished individuals whose work illustrates a rarely discussed reality of the Cyprus problem and a hopeful part of that reality. The grassroots resourcefulness of researchers, entrepreneurs, creatives, and activists who find ways to work together despite the logistical and political obstacles posed by the divide. While all these activities are not substitutes for an overall political solution to the Cyprus problem, they are beacons and can act as pressure points on the political negotiation process and are, of course, examples of the numerous opportunities in innovation, research, and business that the long-term solution to the Cyprus problem can bring. Joining me in this panel today are Ms. Elizabeth Spehar, Special Representative of the UN Secretary General and Head of the UN Peacekeeping Force in Cyprus, Mr. Burak Berk Doluay, Co-founder of CyprusInno, Professor Charis Psaltis, Associate Professor of Social and Developmental Psychology at the University of Cyprus, Ms. Natasha Rovo, an economist at the World Bank, Mr. Hasan Siber, the co-founder of Colive, and Ms. Sholeh Zahraei, a writer, film director, and film producer at Lupa Pictures. Thank you all for being with us today, and I'm very sorry that I can't be there with you on stage. My first question is for Ms. Spehar. Ms. Spehar, in the past 2 decades, the Cyprus problem has come very close to a solution on at least 2 occasions, the Annan Plan referenda in 2004 and the Crans-Montana talks in 2017. Right now, however, the 2 sides seem to be further apart than they have ever been, or at least that's what it seems like to someone of my generation. This creates a dispiriting environment for those committed to peace building on the island. In light of the 2 leaders meeting last month in New York City, where do the Cyprus peace talks stand now? And from your experience on the island, how important are bottom-up efforts of cross-community collaboration to the overall peace process?
Great. Thank you so much, Argyro, and thank you to the organizers. This has been really quite an extraordinary day. I've followed a number of the panels and very high quality and absolutely relevant topics for us today, considering the future of this island and the region. And I have to also give a big thanks to everyone who's still in the audience, whether it's online or here in the auditorium, because it is rather late in the day in Cyprus, so you're showing some real perseverance. As to your question, Argyro, and I know we don't have a lot of time, or your 2-part question. First of all, where are we in the peace talks given recent developments? Well, I think you already answered your own question in part. You did talk about a stalemate. We are in a situation right now where the UN has made several efforts to bring everyone back to the table. that hasn't materialized yet. We had the 5+1 informal meeting in April in Geneva, where good discussions were held. And very recently, as you mentioned, there was a luncheon between the Secretary General and the two leaders on the island to see if we could find some common ground and get back to negotiations. That has not happened yet, so we need to see in the coming period what more we can do as UN, at least playing our part to get that to materialize. But of course, it's not only in our hands, and I would say it's largely not in our hands. So that doesn't sound like a terribly optimistic scenario, I realize that, but for me it makes your second question even more important, and that is how important are cross-cooperation initiatives, people working together across the divide, grassroots peace building. Well, sometimes people, as you said, get dispirited, and when they see that things are not yet moving or not moving as quickly as they would like, they just stop interacting or they stop getting involved. But I think it should be the opposite. The less things are moving, I think the more people need to take heed and to participate. And so in this current context, I think building those bridges are more important than ever. You know, for the United Nations, it's not just, we're not just talking about this for the Cyprus context, but for the UN, grassroots peace building is key in so many conflict contexts. And you only have to see a number of former conflict situations that I could mention in different parts of the world, including in Europe. If you look at the Northern Ireland Good Friday Agreement, it's hard to get to an agreement, but it's even harder to make it stick and to make it sustainable and to really transform the society. And I think if we don't start early, we will have that much more to do in future. So if I look at the Cyprus context and why this grassroots peace building is important, I would say, first of all, it's a small island, so that the more people are working together, the more opportunities there will be. And we've been living through COVID, through the pandemic. There are a lot of common problems on both sides of the island, loss of employment, the health and safety concerns of the pandemic. I think we'll be better off if people are working in tandem in those areas. And then you can look at areas such as the environment. How on earth on a small island can we solve things and improve the ecological situation on Cyprus if people aren't working together? I mean, you cannot just resolve environmental issues on 2/3 of the island or 1/3 of the island. People need to work across the divide. But let me go back to the point of making an agreement last. We don't just need a settlement agreement, we need a sustainable agreement. And we've seen time again, I like to say, once the ink is dry on an agreement, that's when the really hard part starts, to make it last, to consolidate it, to make it sustainable. And if we don't have more connections across the divide, starting now, it will just make it that much harder in future. And we do know that there has been a division, a de facto division on the island for a long time, which means that people have grown up separately. There's not a lot of connections, and that is not a good foundation for peace. What I would like to see happen more is that we're creating what I call a constituency for peace on this island. And let me say one final thing about that. So we're talking about grassroots cooperation across the divide, which can happen in many different fields. And I'm so glad to see such a diverse group here on the panel, where we have filmmakers, we have entrepreneurs, we have academics. That's fantastic. We need those diverse voices, and we need that diverse participation. But we also need to pick up, I think, a point that was repeated in so many panels today, and that is the importance of citizens' engagement on policy making and in politics in general. And various panelists, as well as Ms. Dimitriou this morning, underscored the importance of more women being involved and young people. Well, that has to translate to the Cyprus problem as well. We need to have more involvement of citizens across the board in the peace process, more inclusivity, and certainly we need to hear women's voices and youth voices as well. If we don't have that, I think it will make it that much harder, because what do we need to do? We need to make sure that the leaders get back to the table and the other parties in a meaningful and results-oriented way. We need to make sure that they can come to a mutually beneficial agreement. Then we need people to vote in simultaneous referenda and vote yes. And then we need to make sure that that agreement lasts. At each of those stages, in my view, we need to have citizens involved. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Spehar. Your point about civic engagement is especially important, and I now want to turn it to Professor Psaltis, whose lab at the University of Cyprus has been conducting quantitative and qualitative research on Cypriots' attitudes to the other side and to a potential solution to the Cyprus problem for years now. And a lot of these findings, Professor Psaltis, go against mainstream impressions that, for example, that claim, for example, that most Cypriots are suspicious of a solution right now and that the two communities have drifted further apart in the past decade. Can you give us 2 or 3 findings that prove that there is civic engagement across the divide, that there are grassroots contacts and cooperations on the island?
Yes, thank you, Argyro. Thank you very much. I want to thank the Cyprus Forum for the invitation. Let me start by saying that it is not uncommon to see in academic research that sometimes our findings differ from polls published in newspapers around the way of resolving the problem, how people feel about the issue, etc. And this is mainly because of a phenomenon we call in social psychology the spiral of silence, or the phenomenon of pluralistic ignorance. And what does that essentially mean is that in periods of stalemate and where people are dispirited, as you rightly mentioned, and Mrs. Spehar, sometimes people feel that they cannot actually express their wish for the solution of the problem because of a climate or a negative norm that they feel is around the climate. So in that sense, the real worth of academic research is when you ask people not only about their expectations, so whether they really expect that the solution will be found, but actually also ask them at the same time about their wish for a solution. And once you start making this distinction, and this is a methodological but very important point, you realize that whereas the majority of the people in Cyprus, and I mean in both communities, feel dispirited or, that there is a very low chance of getting to a solution, actually there is also a vast majority of people that they wish to find a solution. And this vast majority of people who wish to find a solution, it's not just really, a general wish for peace, but we actually measure with colleagues in the Hebrew University of Israel and colleagues in the University of Kent and Kiel, Neophytos Loizidis, Hussein Chakal, who is a Turkish Cypriot, very good collaborator, with Oded Leshem, who studies the issue of hope and threat in situations of ethnic conflict. We studied exactly this issue, and we have found that the vast majority of people in Cyprus, in both communities, wish for a solution, not only in general terms, but also in the specific content of a compromise that goes into the political compromise of securing Greek Cypriots from the influence of Turkey and also giving Turkish Cypriots political equality. Also in the context of being a bizonal, bicommunal federation. And so in that sense, we go much beyond the general idea of reaching peace, but actually a very concrete kind of compromise, which I think is very close to the Guterres framework that has been discussed recently. So this is very important, I think a very important finding. But then there's also a lot of findings from the social psychological literature that are relevant to the Cyprus issue. For example, one major topic that we discuss as social psychologists is the issue of intergroup contact. And we know that when people come into contact in post-conflict settings, there is the possibility of reducing prejudice. And we have now established in more than 30 research projects in both communities of Cyprus that this is indeed the case. I will just give you a few numbers. We know that about half of Turkish Cypriots report having a friend from the other community. We know that about 1/3 of Greek Cypriots report having a friend from the other community. We have also seen some more political, some questions on more political issues, which have to do of how Greek Cypriots and Turkish Cypriots position themselves on bizonal, bicommunal federation. And after Crans-Montana failure, we have seen that the percentage of people who are supporting federation, and this is mostly in the Greek Cypriot community, is on the rise. And it's now around 65 to 70%. So people who either would be ready to accept federation as a compromise solution, or people who would be ready to accept it as a necessary solution to end the conflict. If you add these two groups together, you reach about 65 to 70%. So I think all this is very important. And if we dig a bit, under the ground, we will find that there is much more than the general climate. So I think this would be, for the time being, I would answer your question, I think, Argyro.
Thank you. No, that's fantastic, and we'll discuss more about concrete examples of this kind of contact and cooperation that your research points to. And with that in mind, I will turn to Mr. Doluay, the co-founder of CyprusInno, which is the only bizonal, communal, intercommunal, I should say, and that's very important to note that there are more than just two communities on the island. So CyprusInno is the only bizonal, intercommunal entrepreneurial network on the island. Mr. Doluay, can you summarize CyprusInno's mission and the reasons why you and your co-founder, Steven Stavru, decided to start this cross-island network for startups and entrepreneurs?
Yes, thank you, everyone. Thank you for the invitation to the organizers. Basically, CyprusInno's mission is what we try to do, what Ms. Spehar mentioned and what Mr. Charis mentioned, on the grassroots, by bringing people together. Its mission is to use entrepreneurship as a peace-building tool in post-conflict regions. And we started testing this in 2016. How it started is I was working on using entrepreneurship as a youth empowerment tool back in the day. And Steven was coming here from New York for summer holidays and doing his internship and seeing what's happening here and believing that entrepreneurship can be used to bring peace. At the same time, there was another initiative I was working on, trying to encourage people to mediate trade between Greek Cypriots and Turkish Cypriots using the Green Line regulation, which that project was failing back in the day. And Steven was the only person who found me through that and emailed. He was looking for entrepreneurial activity in North. He found me on Google's 8th page, sent an email. It was the only email that we got in that project, and he wrote this long email about, basically it was giving me exactly the same vision that he had on how entrepreneurship could be used in Cyprus to build peace. So we got together and built CyprusInno on a single platform, which was a digital platform that was highlighting all entrepreneurial activity, mainly startups on both sides of the island, as well as any event related to technology, startups, and then startup jobs. Because back that, still it's high, but then it was higher. The youth unemployment was very high back. That was the main thing. And we actually met with Steven in December 2016 when he came to Cyprus, and we decided to do our first physical event. So currently now, over the years, CyprusInno provides many digital and physical tools, and its sole aim is to make people come together from both sides of the island and create businesses or collaboration, because we believe that will create sustainable peace, what we've been talking about That if people, it's often hard for people like from same community to just meet and become friends. And then we expect if there's a solution, people will just go and hug each other the next day. So we believe like business will help people come together. They will need to build trust. And actually we didn't realize, but when we were working on CyprusInno with Steven, we're two people who didn't know each other. We met online. We built this platform, which turned into a social enterprise, and actually our collaboration was exactly what we were trying to encourage other people to do. And he became my best man, and my wife complains that I see him more than I see her, but this is exactly what we want others to do as well, that will lead to sustainable peace.
Thank you, Mr. Doluay. A powerful example of one such intercommunal collaboration in the business sphere, and a company that relies on the green line regulation that Mr. Doluay referred to, is Colive, an olive oil company founded by Hasan and Alexandros Philippidis. Mr. Siber, can you briefly walk us through how the idea for your company came about and what the company's business model is? How do you make it work across the divide?
Sure. So, first of all, thanks to the forum for having me here. It's a pleasure to be around all these amazing people on the same platform. The idea came about 3 years ago. It is a cross between my obsession with olive oil and a product that comes from all of the Cyprus. So it was a statement piece for us, and then so the idea then flourished from that basis, creating a product that will give hope, but also taste amazing and be a successful product, commercial product as well. Our business model is extremely simple. We buy olives from farmers on both sides of the divide. We bring them together and then brand, market, and sell the olive oil, wholesale and directly online throughout the world. We then donate 10% of each bottle to NGOs and social entrepreneurship ecosystem in Cyprus, precisely to grow from our farmer network to impact and have a wider footprint. So CyprusInno is actually one of them that we donate to. To talk about our operations, there's something that Burak mentioned, which is the Green Line regulation. So in terms of intercommunal trade and movement, Green Line regulation, to give you a little bit of context, Green Line regulation came into effect exactly 1 day before Republic of Cyprus joined the EU. And it's the legal framework to control the trade between the two communities. This is the basis of our operation. This is the framework that we base our operations on. One of the problems that we faced in the case of olive is that we can, for example, we can cross olives, but we cannot cross olive oil. So this, in fact, impacts our cost and effort, quite a bit of a margin. The way that we resolved is actually we went more grassroots. Like our work literally starts from grassroots, and the more challenge that we faced in this process, that from olive oil we went then to farmers. We went to actual communities, actual farmer communities, actual villages, and the idea was to have an initial product that we can test and try. And that sort of challenge, and I like to say obstacle is the way, to quote famous author, became more of an advantage for us in abroad. Throughout the world. So that is from then on, I mean, I like to close up, I think, how to overcome that, which is EU was, throughout this forum, was the central piece of all of the conversations nearly. EU is also based on a very simple premise of the decreasing and removing the obstacles for trade and movement, increase the economic benefit, and that will lead to lasting peace in Europe, which was in war for quite a bit of time that we don't realize now. And we're reminded by certain events that EU is breaking and Brexit, that sort of reminded us for a while back, and then now the pandemic. So my leaving thought it would be to like, we can achieve the same thing in Cyprus. I think that's why we do what we do, is to have that economic benefit that really goes to grassroots, really impacts the communities on the ground, than to say the progress, and economic progress and social progress, then will bring about lasting peace, which Ms. Spehar also talked about, and everybody else.
Thank you so much. And we'll get a chance to sort of go a bit deeper into your branding and marketing strategies abroad in a bit. Mrs. Zahraei, I want to turn to you now. You were born in Iran and came to Cyprus from Germany more than 10 years ago, where you founded the production company Lupa Pictures alongside your partner Camille Saldoun. And the two of you have been extremely prolific, producing films with a strong peace-oriented message, including The Olive Tree at the Border and Letters to Cyprus. How have you seen your work impact Cypriot audiences on both sides of the island? And how can film and the arts in general affect audiences' impressions of the other side?
Thank you very much. First of all, thank you for the kind invitation, dear Argyro, and also the organizers for putting up such a great event and bringing us all together, which I think is really the way to go. So my partner Camille and I make Cypriot films that are about issues that relate to the whole of Cyprus, not only northern or southern part. And the Cypriot audiences respond to our films no matter from which community they are. And this is in a very emotional and positive way. And our films create a sense of unity and a common shared pain. So often we got the feedback where they say that they didn't know that this happened to the other side. And for example, missing people. We have encountered people who didn't know that the other community has also missing people. It is unbelievable, but it happened. And so the artificially created practice of othering and its notions of us and them by politics disappear, and we could see that people realize that their painful experiences and past are not exclusive to them only, but that they share it with the so-called other side or other community. And our audiences often asked us about our film characters, whether they are Greek Cypriot or Turkish Cypriot, because we didn't used to have dialogue in our films that are dedicated to the Cyprus issue. And this confused the audience because they wanted to categorize the characters because they were taught to do that. And because they were indoctrinated beliefs, and those were demolished. And we could see some sort of catharsis followed by a motivation to approach members of the other side and exchange info, emotions, and experiences, and new great friendships established. And this is such a rewarding thing to see as filmmakers. And we could see that the Cypriot audiences, unfortunately, often don't know that, that Cyprus is a diverse, multilingual, multicultural country with Cypriots having several languages and religious beliefs. This is due to the poor educational system, unfortunately, on both sides of the divide. And Cypriots don't learn much about members of the diverse communities. Many don't know that the Republic of Cyprus has two official languages, namely Greek and Turkish. That Turkish-speaking Cypriots or Armenian and Maronite Cypriots have lived on the island for many centuries. It's sad to see, for example, that we have more flags from Greece and Turkey rather than the Cyprus flag. And it's also sad that the two main communities of Turkish-speaking and Greek-speaking Cypriots unfortunately communicate in English, which is the language of their colonizers, namely the British Empire. And we think that language is very crucial, and it should be really, Turkish and Greek should be mandatory at schools. So with the help of films dedicated to issues of concern of all Cypriots, intercommunal, as you also mentioned, no matter belonging to which community or language, this artificially constructed propaganda is being demolished. And this doesn't serve the agenda of nationalists and separatists on both sides of the divide, but this should be even more of a reason for filmmakers in Cyprus to make films that criticize the status quo and move the audiences towards rejection of nationalistic and fascist propaganda and encourage unity, peace, and reconciliation. Camila and I hope really that our fellow filmmakers dare to make more films dedicated to the issues that I just mentioned.
Thank you, Mrs. Zahraei. And it's true that art and film have a different way of reaching people, and that is why it's so important for both state and private actors to support the arts on the island. I will move on to Mrs. Rovo now. Mrs. Rovo, we've just heard the stories of 3 entrepreneurs that point to the rich variety of the small and medium business ecosystem that exists on the island, despite the division. Based on the World Bank's research on Cyprus and in other post-conflict societies, what sort of policies need to be implemented to help support such businesses and initiatives and to continue encouraging this intercommunal business ecosystem to grow?
Thank you so much, Argyro, for this question, and thanks to the organizer and also for sharing such inspiring stories. I repeat something that has been said, but that's important. For a sustainable and including a long-standing solution, it's important that the solution is supported by the private sector, by the civil society, but also that the solution itself comes from the private sector and the civil society. And in these situations, and in Cyprus in particular, entrepreneurs have a big role to play. We are discussing with private sector representatives as well as academia and civil society organizations what are the areas where there is the growth potential and also the potential for private sector development. And what we want to hear from them is what are the challenges that they face on a daily basis, and what are the solutions that can be put in place. To give you an example, the Halloumi Hellim, the PDO registration in April represents a great opportunity, and it's also, it has also an economic and political significance. It will allow producers to access the PDO, it will improve the quality of the products, and will also favor integration between the two economies. However, we all know that this opportunity has also many challenges. And there are challenges coming from meeting the quality requirements for the production, challenges coming from the phytosanitary measures, and challenges coming from green line trade and green line regulation. Therefore, it's important that policies are implemented to address these challenges. And our agricultural team is actually working together with private sector representatives and civil society to understand how to better address these challenges. We are actually looking beyond Halloumi Hellim, and we are looking into products that can represent opportunities for, to promote integration between the two economies. Let me conclude by saying that, in general, what we learn from similar experiences is that it's crucial to allow for free movement of people, of labor, capital, and technology in order to achieve a successful implementation of a solution. And in particular, when it comes to entrepreneurs in Cyprus and green line trade, it's crucial that 3 elements are in place. And these are the profitability, compliance, and trust. And policies should support all of them. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mrs. Rovo. I want to be mindful of time, but I also don't want to miss the opportunity of asking a second question to each of our panelists. But I will try and be as quick as I can with the articulation of my questions. And if we consider this to be, a kind of a version of a lightning round question and answer session, that could work. So, Mr. Doluay, we usually associate the term entrepreneurship with technology or for-profit industries. But one of CyprusInno's latest projects is something called The Base, which is a social impact generator fostering social entrepreneurship and innovation. Can you define what a social impact generator is and what sorts of training and resources it can provide to entrepreneurs, civil society members, and others working to bring change in Cyprus?
Yes, I'll try to be fast. So basically, the base was the dream that we had from the first day with Steven. We were hoping if our concept works, we'd be having a physical space in the buffer zone so we could bring people together and do more programs, etc. Thanks to UN, they gave us the opportunity and enabled us to use a space in the buffer zone so we could build the base by CyprusInno, which when we were building it, we were thinking, what are we going to call it? The guys before us there, for those who know CCMC, they had a community radio. It was a big container which we wanted to do co-working, bring people in. And then we also wanted to train people. So it's not a co-working, it's not a radio, it's not an accelerator, it's not an incubator, it's a bit of everything. So we said, what are we doing here? We're creating social impact. So we said, okay, let's call it social impact generator. And we wrote a phrase for that. We wrote a definition, which a social impact generator is a hybrid space that brings together people from public, private sectors and civil society together to co-create. And it's always ever evolving as well, because what it does is it looks at the society and needs of each stakeholder and proposes programs and solutions based on current needs, and it's not a fixed program that is offered. What we currently have there is a studio that people can come and do podcasts. There's an event space. Last week we had a networking festival with over 120 people attending with COVID measures in place, outdoors. And we're also doing a training next week on social entrepreneurship for 2 days training. So there are lots of programs. I'll cut it short, but if you're interested, you can check the base by CyprusInno online and you can see all type of programs that we offer.
Fantastic, thank you so much. Do check out CyprusInno's and the base's websites for more information. Mrs. Zahraei, you spoke about the mission of Lupa Pictures and of your films, and I want to sort of hear a bit more about this idea that you use issues common to both communities and to all communities on the islands in your films. Most recently, your short film, The Hunt, which was also partly funded by the Cyprus Cinema Advisory Committee, has screened in international festivals across Europe. And the film deals with LGBTQI+ issues on the island, as well as family relationships in Cyprus. How can addressing these social issues that go beyond those of the Cyprus problem, how can that function as a platform for grassroots peace building on the island?
Since the social construct and society in Cyprus is very much similar on both sides of the divide, and the issues are actually experienced very much in a very similar way. For example, the issue of homophobia is equal at the level on both sides of the divide. We cannot say that the North is more homophobic than the South. We thought that we as filmmakers should be addressing this type of issues, and this is part of the Cyprus problem. And at this point, I would like to mention the intersectional activism and approach to the issues that we have in Cyprus. Intersectionality, just briefly, is a feminist and sociological concept that marks the examination of the intersections between and the overlapping of different systems of oppression. Oppressions are mutually shaped and affected by each other. And when we started to work on our film, The Hunt, we realized that homophobia is related to so many other oppressions, like religious fanaticism, militarism, nationalism, colonialism, animal abuse, borders, and divisions.
Sorry to interrupt you while you're talking. I'm just getting a note that we have to wrap up the panel, unfortunately. There's many questions I'd like to ask, but to wrap it up, I would like to have Mrs. Spehar sort of give us her advice to grassroots organizations, to civic society, to peace-oriented entrepreneurs that are committed to a sustainable solution to the Cyprus problem. How can we take action, Mrs. Spehar, at this point to work towards a united future for the country in the current political climate? And I'm terribly sorry we didn't get to the other speakers for more information. I encourage you all to ask your questions after the panel. I encourage the Cyprus Forum to have another peace building panel next year. So please, Mrs. Spehar, to you for the conclusion of the panel.
All right, thank you, Argyro. It's always a bit of a tricky thing to give anyone advice, especially if you're from outside the island, or if, like in my case, you're a mother, your children never take your advice. But anyhow, let me just put out 5 points really quickly towards the peace builders. My first point would be, don't wait for others to take initiative. I often hear from people, well, you know, we need for the international community to do something first. We need the leaders to meet again. It's not a good climate. The time is not right. Well, if the time is not right now, when will it be? As I said at the beginning of my remarks, sometimes it's when things look the most challenging that we need people to engage. And this has been, for example, my advice and my encouragement to the women's movement here. The women that are coming together every day on Cyprus to try to move forward the peace process. Don't wait for someone else to open the door for you. Open your own door. Women can be the vanguard of the peace process. Secondly, be ready to work with people with diverse opinions. One of my concerns is that we need to, as I call it, broaden the tent. We can't have the peace builders and the peaceniks and the people who are already convinced that we need a settlement and that we need a solution to continue just to talk amongst each other. So my understanding is a lot of NGOs now and entrepreneurs who want to work across the divide, they're talking more about concerns-based action, or let's say products-based action. In other words, start working on the basis of where you have commonalities. And then people who are interested in those issues or in those products or those opportunities, they may join, whether they have up until now had a vocation for peace or whether they've worked with someone from the other side up until now. It could be an opportunity. But if we keep just working amongst each other, talking amongst each other in a very small group, I'm afraid it will be harder to get there. We've been working with these young people called Youth Champions for Environment and Peace. And it's been great because it's been getting young people who are interested in the environment, who may not necessarily be so interested in politics more broadly, and maybe not even in the peace process, but they're joined by that common concern over the environment, and that's the first step. Another, let's say, third point is to share your positive experiences, and that's what we've been doing here today, and I really applaud everyone on this panel for their initiative and their courage and for showing us what really can be done if you put your mind to it, despite the obstacles. I think we need to hear more of that. I think we have to have more good information out there. I have to say there's a lot of misinformation and lack of information about the Cyprus process and the Cyprus problem. So I applaud people like the Cyprus Dialogue Forum who are putting information out there online, publicly sourced information to explain what was negotiated in the last round of negotiations, for example, in quite some detail so that people understand what was actually on the way to being achieved and what is possible. Number 4, I think you need to be creative and you need to be persistent, because all of you have hinted one way or another at the obstacles, and there are challenges and there are obstacles, but I think the dividends that you can get are truly worth it. And so I think people need to keep that in mind. And final point, above all, don't give up. I know things may look a bit dire right now. I know Argyro was referring to people being dispirited. My boss, the Secretary General of the United Nations, has said that he would not give up on Cyprus. And he said he wouldn't give up on Cyprus because he believes in the promise of prosperity and peace on this island for all Cypriots and all who live here. And so if my boss is not going to give up, I don't think we have the right to give up either. I think we're always waiting for someone else to do the job for us. Everybody has a role in peace. Everybody has a role in building the future of this island in peace, harmony, and prosperity. And so I don't think it's an excuse for anyone that the key is here, the key is there, the key's on the island, the key's off the island, the key's in the leaders' drawers in their offices. No, the key is with all of us, or at least with all of you. So I applaud you all. I applaud all of you in the audience and those who are perhaps online for your perseverance, because it's been a long day and a panel that has gone over time. But I think it's an extremely important panel to end with today. So thank you so much, Argyro. Thank you to the organizers, and thank you for everyone who's been here.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Argyro. Thank you. If you can just stay with me until we wrap this up. On a personal note, I feel great that this forum ended with this panel, and it's great to see familiar faces. Sholeh, apart from a filmmaker, is helping me learn Turkish. So, and Mrs. Spehar, you did say something very important, that women play definitely a great role in shaping tomorrow's society. I, for one, and a very good friend of mine, a Turkish Cypriot mother, have vowed to bring our children up together. So both of them will have their own concepts of what a Turkish Cypriot and what a Greek Cypriot look like. Basically the same. Thank you very much.